The Coalition of Concerned Citizens continuing its campaign of lowering the cost of electricity. Union executives lamenting the use of casual labor. And a popular band leader to be honored.
The Bahamas Tonight Northern Edition starts now.
This is the Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition. Good evening, all. I'm Shashina Roll-Farquharson. As always, it is so great to have you with us. Topping news, the Coalition of Concerned Citizens continuing its campaign of lowering the cost of electricity in West Grand Bahama. During a town meeting at the Mount Zion Baptist Church in 8 Mile Walk, residents heard about a viable option being proposed for the Western District. Sabrina Brown reports.
The Northern Bahamas Utilities Holdings Company Limited is proposing a new power company for the Western District, as the West End agreement with the Grand Bahama Power Company is set to expire in September of this year. President of Northern Bahamas Utilities Carlton Bosfield says Grand Bahama residents are now paying 32 to 45 cents per kilowatt hour compared to Florida's 10 to 11 cents per kilowatt hour. His company is proposing a firm solar power plant.
I was looking at the flyer that was used by the coalition, and it showed solar panels. That's what's called a grid level ground mount solar system. We are talking about installing a system like that, but not just solar panels. To firm it up, we would actually have them backed up by generators that would use propane fuel, which is another very clean fuel. Two big advantages to this: the reduction in the cost of electricity and the reduction in the carbon footprint of West Grand Bahama.
He says the new power company will be a fully integrated electric utility in West Grand Bahama.
We're not talking about we would generate the power, you would pay a lower cost, but you go and pay it to somebody else. No, the power company that would be created, it's a new fully integrated power company. Fully integration means you start from the generation of the electricity all the way to the end consumer, which is once it gets into your house and you see it manifest itself in your electric appliances. This new company would be responsible for all of that.
According to Bosfield, this new power plant could also bring down the cost of electricity for consumers in the Freeport area.
We've sized the plant so that we would have enough surplus power to actually sell some of it back to Grand Bahama Power at a reduced cost. And the intent is, hopefully, this will help them to be incentivized to reduce the cost of electricity to people in Freeport.
Leader of the Coalition of Concerned Citizens, Pastor Eddie Victor, says the high cost of electricity on Grand Bahama continues to have a negative impact on economic development, and he says this proposed power company will have major benefits for the island.
Number one, the rates of electricity will be reduced in West Grand Bahama and East Grand Bahama by 33 to 40%. This new proposed power company will employ approximately 60 Bahamians in West Grand Bahama and approximately somewhere between 20 in East Grand Bahama. It will be Bahamian owned and operated.
Sabrina Brown, ZNS Network News.
A union executive is appealing to the powers that be to pay special attention to the workforce here on Grand Bahama, particularly in the industrial and tourism sectors. As you'll hear in this report, the union is lamenting the use of permanent workers being replaced by temporary workers. Vice President for the Trade Union Congress in the Northern Bahamas, Kirkland Russell, says the union has been more than accommodating by meeting with government officials and relevant stakeholders on various issues, as opposed to using aggressive tactics. But he says the time has come to pay special attention to a new trend in Grand Bahama, where many permanent workers are being replaced for casual workers.
When we look at it, you have a billion-dollar company called the Freeport Container Port, Borco, Shipyard, Bradford Marine, Bahama Rock, you name it. You don't find there's no country, I believe, in the Caribbean where you have that much equity in one place. Yet, when you look at the state of the economy in Grand Bahama, it is dying.
He believes that it is dying simply because of this replacement practice by bigger companies on the island of Grand Bahama. Casual workers oftentimes replace permanent workers for less pay, more work, and no benefits. But he believes that this is destroying the workforce.
We need help on this island. The workforce on this island has to be regulated and has to reflect improvement, betterment. You know, we can't take workers back in the country. We can't take workers pre-1800. You know, it is total nonsense when you look at these major companies using schools as employment agencies to hire workers.
This union leader believes that something must be done for the protection of all workers.
There's no place in the Employment Act can you find the word casual worker. You only find worker. Well, then how we allow these billion-dollar companies to come in here and casualize the workforce in Grand Bahama? Doesn't have nothing to do with the union. This has to do with the powers to be working in tripartite with the union, the worker, the union, and the employer, along with the government, sitting down and making sure that things are done with two things, you know, with justice and fairness.
In other news, we are 1 week into the 2018 Atlantic hurricane season, and all of the major predictions point to an active one. Coastal communities on Grand Bahama were ravaged by storms of the past, and now the Ministry of Works is taking steps to safeguard residents and their properties in one of the most vulnerable areas of the island. Sabrina Brown has more on this report.
A no-build zone order was put in place for communities along the southern coastline following Hurricanes Francis and Jean in 2004. And following the recent devastating storms, the Ministry of Works is now enforcing that policy. Officer in charge on Grand Bahama, Tony Hudson Bannister.
Those communities of Mactown, Lewis Yard, Pindus Point, Smiths Point, Hepburn Town, anything that is along the southern coastline, there will be no further approvals for anything new to be built in those areas. Refurbishments, we will look at it and advise accordingly, but as it stands, until we are able to update what we are looking at in the building code, those are deemed a no-build zone.
Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Works, Iram Lewis, says there could be major changes to the island's current building code as it is now under review.
Maybe it should be now part of our building code where it's mandatory that either hurricane shutters are put on these buildings prior to getting your occupancy certificate, or impact resistant windows. And even those that are already occupied, we want to encourage residents to now put up those hurricane shutters or make it part of our code. And additionally, we want to arrest construction in flood zones.
With the storms coming greater every year, we are now looking at, in specific, the connection detail with the stilts onto an existing structure. We are still vetting what is being classified as something to put a building on stilts in these areas.
Hudson Bannister notes that any property owner wishing to conduct refurbishments must now follow strict guidelines.
Anything that is being refurbished fully on the southern coastline, those architectural drawings would have to have been approved by a structural engineer and stamped off on such, who will take full responsibility for any connection detail that they would have had submitted into our offices.
Sabrina Brown, ZNS Network News.
Switching gears now, ZNS 8:10 a.m. taking the community outreach program to the administrator's office in Freeport this week. Officials are hoping to get a head start by addressing all issues related to shelters and shelter management. Kimberly Mullings was there.
Be also ready.
Island Administrator Preston Cunningham says shelters across Grand Bahama are up to par, with the exception of one.
We have one or two matters of concern. that the government is presently addressing. And this relates to the gym in 8 Mile Walk, where we would have had a number of issues with the restroom facilities and one or two other things. But the Ministry of Public Works would have been in here already. They would have done the assessment. The report is available and in the appropriate hands.
NEMA officer Tammy Mitchell says one of the most important aspects of hurricane preparation is the inspection of shelters before the hurricane season to ensure that they are in a state of readiness.
Checking the bathroom facilities, checking the electrical, checking the evacuation routes, checking the facility itself, even if it comes to Ministry of Works when they're checking for the technical aspect of it to make sure that the facility can serve as a shelter. But we also want to encourage persons that when you're going into these shelters, there is some rules and regulations that you do have to follow.
The NEMA official added that they offer adequate training to volunteers at shelters.
There's a 3-day workshop that you would have to attend that will qualify you to be a shelter service manager, and that entails very intense training from as far as when you first come into the facility, while you're in the facility, even after, to ensure that when we're using these facilities, they're turned back over to the persons in an orderly manner.
Deputy Director at Social Services, Paula Marshall, says they work alongside NEMA in the event of a disaster.
They're to bring the basic necessities that they would need, which would be their medical needs, basic foodstuffs, making sure they have their documents, blankets, basic things that they're going to need for the duration of a hurricane, which is most likely about 2 days. And then in the aftermath, Social Services goes out to do inspection in terms of what is the damage that has been done and to determine who needs shelter post-hurricane.
Pastor Robert Lockhart, Grand Bahama Christian Council President, says as a body, they are responsible for ensuring religious leaders mobilize their congregation to be of assistance to their members, the communities in which they are a part of, and then the greater community at large.
Well, I think our main role as a Christian council is to encourage the Christian community to be neighborly, to encourage pastors and their churches to make themselves available to help in any way possible, using your facilities and shelters, providing counseling, prayer, support to people during this time, especially in the community where you're involved.
First Baptist Church has been one of the longest-serving shelters on Grand Bahama. Reverend Dr. Keith Russell urges his colleagues to step up to the plate and offer their churches as necessary.
I plead to my brothers and sisters who are pastors of churches in the community to participate in this process because it allows us to house more people in the event of a major disaster, because we have about 50,000 people. I'm understanding now we have space for 2,500, and so we need everybody on board in this regard. And it is the Christian thing to do, the righteous thing to do, the just thing to do.
Kimberly Mullings, ZNS Network News.
Thanks, Kim, and don't forget to answer tonight's trivia question to win a ticket to Tyrus Riley's concert. The question is, when is the new date for the GB Homecoming concert? The winner will be announced at the end of tonight's newscast. Stay with us. The Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition, continues right after this.